And part of my work is engaging with a team that is developing out the strategy and investments related to Project Connect, along with community-facing displacement mitigation funding opportunities. I have the honor of welcoming you all to our first iteration of the community-initiated solutions, which in and of itself is monumental. But before we do that, I'm going to take a moment to say thank you. Thank you to all of you for showing up in this community and advocating for these resources. Thank you for committing your time and using it to center the community, to hear from the community, and to continue working with the community. And thank you for being the community. We know that these resources are a beginning and not an end. We know that this will not be enough. We know that this undershoots the need, and yet we have to acknowledge that this is a great start. We have learned from similar communities that have invested in transportation infrastructure that led to displacement, and we have worked to do this different. And we want to be clear, these resources are intended to help mitigate displacement pressures as a result of the development of the light rail and bus rapid transit system, which increases market pressure due to the amenity that they provide. We also know that more resources are needed. We hope that these processes serve as a framework for how to work with the community and to consider the needs and their ideas in solutions for mitigation, because as the quote says, those who are closest to the problem are usually closest to the solution. Before I hand it over to our Displacement Prevention Officer, Nefertiti Jackman, I want to thank our staff, Paula, Rachel, Ursula, Nefertiti, and Alan Fish, Sarah Ramos, and Cassandra Alexander. Without their work, this would not be possible. And with that, I'll hand it over to Nefertiti Jackman.
Thank you, Cupid. I think both of us really want to focus on, all of us really want to focus on the community. And one of the things that I just like to share with you before I introduce the team is that our focus, again, for this is community innovation. Like, that is the thing that we're going with. And this is for our community initiated solutions. As Cupid also mentioned, I think this is, I know this is made possible because community advocates, first of all, who believe that the city could and would, the citizens of Austin would support $300 million to address displacement prevention. As we know, what has historically happened in many communities across the country when they've had these types of transportation investments. So we have sought to center community at each step of the way. In addition to that, this would not be possible without the voters who approved, you basically, who approved the $300 million, believing that the city of Austin could do something radically different, and that city leaders and the people of Austin were bold enough and compassionate enough to do something different. So we thank you. But we also thank you for coming out tonight. Those of you who will bring solutions to address our ongoing and growing displacement pressures, the organizations who are already engaged in doing the work without the appropriate resources that you need to be effective delivering the services to some of our most vulnerable populations. So we thank you for committing to this work in the past. We're proud to bring these funding opportunity to you so that you can continue to expand and do your work with the resources. And with the resources, there comes an opportunity to be very innovative and bringing creative solutions, to the community members. We want creativity. We also want responsiveness. We want solutions that really address the real needs that community members have. And so I want to share with you briefly that we are looking for community evaluators. That application opened up today. So in addition to this funding opportunity, we also have opportunities for community members to serve as evaluators. So please pass that on. Encourage people that you know to apply to be a part of this process. So with that, I'd like to go ahead and introduce the team of people who have been working on this project. As you first met, Cupid Alexander, the new Housing and Planning Department's Assistant Director. I'm Nefertiti Jackman, the city's Community Displacement Prevention Officer. We also have Hala Fareed, who is a FUSE Executive Fellow working with us. She has served as the Technical Assistance Lead, and you'll hear from her next. Ursula Henderson is our newest program manager and contract manager. She will serve as a point of contact for this contract. And then she'll also lead some of the session this evening, as well as Rachel Tepper, who's a senior planner, and she's been the design lead for this solicitation. And then also there's Alan Fish, who's a procurement specialist and the point of contact. In addition, we also have Sarah Ramos and their manager, Cassandra Alexander. So there's so many people involved in this and many more. Julie Smith, who has also been a part of this team and who has been effective reaching out to each and every one of you. With that, I'm going to pass it on to Hala Fareed, who will lead us through the next process.
Thank you so much, Nefertiti. I appreciate that. Our agenda is packed full, and we are going to start with logistics. Then we're going to go to roles and responsibilities. We're going to give you an overview of Project Connect and the equity framework. Then we'll go to anti-displacement investments timeline and budget, as well as funding priorities, term and amounts, eligibility, application. We're going to cover questions, required documents, scoring, dashboard maps, and additional resources. We'll also share with you our review process and reporting requirements, as well as the upcoming technical assistance. And then we'll give you time for question and answer. Next slide, please. Our goal today is to familiarize you with the guidelines of the Project Connect Community Initiated Solutions, Notice of Funding Availability, or as we refer to it, the NOFA. We appreciate you taking the time, and again, we thank you. We will do our best to answer questions pertaining to the NOFA, and to that end, we want to have the time to go through the presentation, and we appreciate that you stay muted. Actually, we are going to keep you muted for the duration of the presentation, which is approximately a half an hour. This session is an hour and a half, so we will have an hour for your questions and feedback. We will be monitoring the chat, so if you have any urgent questions, put them in the chat and we will address them once the presentation is over. Again, we'll try to keep it to 1 hour and a half to respect your schedule and your time. I will now let Mr. Fish, Alan, take over for the next slide. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm
Alan?
sorry, I was muted. Okay, I'll start over. So I'm talking about roles and responsibilities. Austin Housing Finance Corporation is the entity that is launching this solicitation. For those who are not familiar with Austin Housing Finance Corporation, it was created in 1979 by the city as a public nonprofit corporation to generate and implement strategic affordable housing solutions. And we are being innovative with the solicitation, so this is appropriate use for this. So HFC is the one that will Project Connect Community Initiated Solutions Contract Administration and is under the administrative control of the HFC treasurer, which is Rosie Trullo. The people that actually get the contract at the end of this solicitation would be the contract recipients, and they're responsible for administering and managing the day-to-day contract activity, ensuring compliance with developing and maintaining all required files, documents, and required reports, and most importantly, complying with all applicable federal, state, and/or local laws, regulations, and ordinances. And I think that's it for me. So we'll go to Ursula for the next slide.
Ursula, you're on mute.
I am on mute. All right, sorry about that. Thanks, Rachel. All right, so I will start over. Again, my name is Ursula Henderson. I want to thank everyone for attending this meeting. I am a program manager with the Housing and Planning Department, Office of Displacement Prevention. As Nefertiti mentioned earlier, I will be the point of contact along with Alan Fish for the Community Initiated Solution solicitation. Our contact information is located at the bottom of the NOFA. In addition to being the point of contact, I will also manage the contracts once awarded to the community organizations and or partners. So why are we here today? As Hala mentioned, we will talk a little bit about Project Connect, Community Initiated Solutions. As many of you may be familiar with, this comprehensive transit system, Project Connect, is a $7.1 billion investment approved by voters November 2020 to expand mobility to all Austinites. Key partners for this joint initiative include the City of Austin, Capital Metro, and Austin Transit Partnership. Next slide, please. So a portion of this enormous investment and the first time ever, $300 million is dedicated for anti-displacement, focusing on long-term solutions to prevent displacement of people burdened by effects of additional cost around the transit area, to create affordable housing, and to create asset building opportunities, helping affordable areas remain affordable. Next slide, please. Voters required the development of the equity tool and for the investment to center around equity and anti-displacement. The equity tool was completed in 2021 and is also part of the Nothing About Us Without Us report. The Nothing About Us report launched this past January and is the guiding force on how the $300 million should be spent. If you have not done so already, it is recommended to thoroughly read this report before preparing an application. Next slide. The $300 million will be spent over the course of 13 years on the timeline displayed on the slide. The Housing and Planning Department announced January 2020 for the plan for the first $65 million. Next slide. $1 million will be dedicated for staffing and community engagement, $23 million for land acquisition, $21 million for land development, and the remaining $20 million, which is why we're here today, is allotted for community initiated solutions. Next slide, please. The purpose for the $20 million allotted to community initiated solution is designed for nonprofit organizations and partners to reduce residential displacement, create investments to prevent the displacement of ownerships, and to create economic mobility in areas vulnerable to displacement within 1 mile of the Project Connect stations and line. Very importantly, the applicants, this $20 million cannot be used for land acquisition, land development, and direct homeless services. There are other city offices that have programs for these purposes. Next slide. There are 3 focus priorities for this round of funding. First, we have renter-tenant stabilization. This line of funding may offer programs and services that stabilize tenants. Next, we have expansion and preservation of home ownership opportunities. This line of funding may be used to expand and preserve home ownership. Examples include mortgage assistance, HUD-approved housing counseling, and foreclosure prevention services. And finally, there is funding for other anti-displacement strategies. We would like to encourage our applicants to be really creative and innovative, creating economic mobility opportunities. Next slide. The Austin Housing Finance Corporation anticipates on awarding up to 15 applications with an initial term of 1 year. The minimum an applicant may apply for is $250,000. Currently, there is no maximum, but the amount requested should meet the purpose outlined in the application. Next slide. Applicants must either be 1, a 501c3 or 501c4 nonprofit organization and a registered city vendor, or there can be a partnership between a nonprofit and for-profit organization or a community-based organization. Partners must identify a lead organization who must be registered vendor and also responsible for coordinating the group's activities. All investments must assist residents who live within 1 mile of the Project Connect station or line in communities vulnerable to displacement. Next slide, please. Other eligibility requirements include the following. Applicants must not be on the city department list. Applications must be signed and complete. Technical assistance provided by the city is required for all vendors accepting a contract award. The selected recipient shall carry insurance for the duration of the agreement and furnish certified of insurance including all policy endorsements to AHFC. So now we want to go ahead and get to the fun part. Rachel will speak to the application process and scoring matrix.
Thanks, Ursula. Hi, my name is Rachel Tepper, and I'm a senior planner in the Displacement Prevention Division, and I've played a large role in the design of this solicitation and the online application. I'd like to bring the application up on screen so that you can get familiar with its features. But first, I'd like to point out a few things. The application must be complete, signed, and submitted by June 13th. The criteria for the evaluation and really what has shaped the application is the Nothing About Us Without Us report and equity tool. And so you'll see that that has really informed how you'll be evaluated and has informed why we're asking the questions that we are asking. If you, for any reason, submit an application before you had meant to, before the deadline, and you'd like to withdraw it to submit another one, you can make those withdrawal requests by emailing the POCs of this solicitation, which are Ursula and Alan. All right, let's jump in. I'm gonna go ahead and bring up on my screen the application. I'll zoom in a little bit to make sure everyone can see. And so the way this online application works is it's fairly simple. The first portion of it is applicant information. This is pretty standard. I do want to point out that we use some question logic. So you'll notice, for example, when you select your applicant type, additional questions will pop up. So when you select that you are a nonprofit organization, for example, we will ask you to enter your vendor number, as well as upload a letter confirming your organization's nonprofit status. So as you explore the application, I did want to highlight some of the question logic tonight so that you're aware of the components. Another thing I want to highlight is that we do have character limits, and you'll see those both in the question. We'll mention the character limits, as well as you'll see it in the text fields at the bottom right hand corner. So you'll want to make sure you won't be punished for writing under the amount, but we do have that maximum character limit to be aware of. I did want to also say you can copy and paste quite easily into this if you want to work from a separate document and paste your responses in. And you are also able to save your application. So if you scroll down to the bottom of the application, as you're working on it, you can click save and resume later. And that will give you a link, and you can also email that link to yourself. So you do not have to fill it out all in one sitting. You can fill it out as you're working on it. Another thing that I wanted to point out is that we do have 3 templates that we are going to ask for as attachments to different sections of this application. The first template is a work plan template. And the way you can access this is there will be links in this presentation, as well as there are links in the application So for example, question 3 is experience, qualifications, and project management. We're asking that you upload resumes of the project manager, audited finance, and the team, audited financials, or your most recent profit and loss, as well as a work plan. And we can, you can click on this link here to download the work plan template. I can bring it up on screen. All of the templates are in Excel. And there's little instructions in there. You can save this to your desktop and work on it as you need to, and then upload it to the file uploader here when you're ready. So we have the work plan template. We have a very similar format for the budget template, as well as an unscored diversity chart template. This won't be a factor in your application, but it will be used for reporting purposes. And so that will be another template that you'll want to make sure you start to fill out and work on as an attachment to your application. I'm gonna pop back on to the presentation now, and we'll have plenty of time for in-depth questions through the technical assistance or this Q&A to talk about the specifics of the questions, but I did want to demonstrate kind of how it works. Again, just highlighting, we will share this presentation after this meeting, but you can also access those templates through this link here with this list of required attachments. So resumes, audited financials, the work plan, budget, and diversity chart are all attachments to the application. I did also want to highlight the application scoring. So the scoring was informed, as we mentioned, by the tool, the equity tool, and the Nothing About Us Without Us report. But we did make sure that it totaled 100 points. So the weight of the different sections or the different scored questions is proportional to the criteria that was relevant from the equity tool. And you can see that criteria on page 12 and 13 of the Notice of Funding Availability or the NOFA. Another thing I wanted to point out are some additional resources to help you fill out your application. The first one is the anti-displacement, Project Connect anti-displacement maps and dashboard. And these are, this dashboard illustrates demographic characteristics of areas within 1 mile of Project Connect stations and lines and communities with vulnerable, active, and chronic displacement risk. So this will be really critical for you to make the case that your focus or your project or program will focus on benefiting the residents who live within 1 mile of the Project Connect lines in areas of displacement risk. We've also have some fact sheets that we developed to really put together high-level takeaways and recommendations for each of the different areas. Here you see the vulnerable, active, and chronic, and we have some suggested ways to think about the different areas in those fact sheets. And finally, we also have another resource we encourage you to take a look at is the Community Investment and Wealth Building Strategies report. This report identifies strategies and tools for building community wealth in Austin, especially in the areas impacted by Project Connect. It was developed by Community Powered Workshop with consultation through consultation with city staff, an advisory committee of local and national experts, and focus groups with community members. This report includes scopes of works for priority strategies and that can inform anti-displacement proposals, and we encourage you to take a look at it. So with that, I just wanted to point out, we have aggregated all of those resources that I just mentioned into a linked with links. So when we share this presentation with you, you will have it all in one place. And that's it for me, and I'll pass it back to Ursula.
Okay, I had to make sure I was not on mute. Thanks, Rachel. All right, so we're going to talk a little about the review process. There are multiple steps during the review process involving multiple evaluations by different groups. City staff will first conduct a completeness check prior to forwarding applications to the community evaluation panel. In this stage, staff will pre-screen applications to ensure minimum qualifications are met. Next, the evaluation panel will review and score applications informed by the Nothing About Us Without Us report and tool using the scoring matrix Rachel went over earlier. The review panel will forward ranked applications to a working group of the Community Advisory Committee, CAC. In return, the CAC will submit their recommendations for funding to AHFC's board for final approval. Next slide, please. City staff will review the awardees' progress quarterly. A final report will also be required at the end of the funding period and must meet the objectives outlined in the background and purpose section of the NOFA. The final report must include a description of how funds supported the organization in meeting the purpose of the contract, qualitative narrative of key performance and accountability measures as outlined in the contract, a final contract budget synopsis that shows how grant dollars were expended, and a budget synopsis for the closeout and the contract. Next slide, please. Okay, we're getting to the end. I know that was a lot of information, so let me just recap on what's going to happen for the next few months. Right now, it's time to apply. Applications opened April 11th, and the deadline to apply for funding is June 13th. During this time frame, we will hold a few optional technical assistance workshops. This will be your opportunity to apply. This will also be your opportunity to apply to be a community evaluator. Applications for this process open today, and the deadline is May 20th. The review process is from June through August. City staff, again, will complete a completeness check of all applicants. City staff will also select the community evaluation panel, who will review and rank applicants, which will be given to the CAC working group for recommendation. In September, the CAC working group recommendations for funding will be submitted to AHFC's board for final approvals. Awardees will work with city staff to finalize their contract. Next slide, please. We are offering 4 technical assistance workshops. This is different from the workshop required for the selected awardee. The workshops are scheduled for April 27th, May 5th, May 11th, and May 19th via Zoom or in person. This will be a great opportunity to ask technical assistance related to the application process. So we really encourage you to sign up soon. So now I am going to pass it to Alan for final words, concluding the pre-submittal orientation.
Okay, thank you. So in conclusion, can you hear me? So in conclusion, thank you for taking your time to participate in this meeting, at the workshops, putting together your applications. This is a big deal for the city and for HFC and for all the people that are working here on this. I ask that you review the NOFA carefully. At the end of the day, this PowerPoint presentation, although we think it's right, is very helpful. But if there's any discrepancy between this PowerPoint and the NOFA rules. We're going to look to the NOFA for any clarifications. And also on that note, if there's anything that we need to change, we will send out an official notification. We call that an addendum. We also may send out a clarification, which would be questions we think everybody needs to know. Those are not just general, simple questions. Those are ones that you really need to know. So we'll be working on that during the whole month of May. We will share this recording, as Hala said, so you can listen to it again. You can share it with others. We're putting it out there for your use. We are committed to helping you succeed. I will note, though, our goal at these technical workshops is not to do your application for you. It's to help you understand what we want and what we need. But at the end of the day, it's your job to complete the application, and they will be scored based on what you submit. And as I said before, we have points of contact, Ursula Henderson and myself, Alan Fish. We put our email addresses on here. We've not put our phone numbers on here because we really prefer to get your questions in writing so that we understand what you're asking and we can respond to you in writing. You can call us too if you want to, but like I said, on the questions, we'd really like to get those in writing. One other thing, just want to reiterate that the due date is November 13th at 4 p.m. That is the first thing that will kick you out of this. If you submit it at 5 p.m. or the next day, there's really no flexibility on that. So with
June
that,
13th.
I'm sorry, 13th. What'd I say? November?
I think November. It's
That's
June
my
13th.
birthday. Okay. Well, thank you. Next slide. The next slide's questions. I believe Hala's going to lead this.
Yes, thank you. Thank you so much, Alan. I appreciate it. We are ready to take questions, but before we do, let's just start with what's in the chat at the moment. I'd love to have Sarah read some of the questions, Ms. Ramos, and share them with us, and then we'll try to answer them, and then we'll open it to the audience. I ask that because of the number of people that have made the time to be present with us, please raise your hand and we'll acknowledge you. And so you can ask your question and we can try to answer it. Remember, this is new. We're gonna do our best to answer all the questions that pertain to the NOFA. You may raise a question that we haven't resolved yet and we need to go back, discuss, and then come back with an answer for you. So just be patient with us as we work through this wonderful new NOFA. Thank you. Sarah?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
The first question is from Caroline, and she's asking, does a vendor have to be the nonprofit or can the for-profit be the vendor?
Rachel, you want to try to take that?
Yes. So if the for-profit is a registered vendor with the city of Austin, the for-profit can be the lead. They just have to partner with a nonprofit team member, and their roles and responsibilities have to be outlined in the budget and the work plan.
Thank you, Rachel.
Alan,
Sarah?
are you saying something?
Yes, I might add that everybody on this call who wants to do work for the city of Austin or for Austin Housing Finance Corporation should go ahead and sign up as a registered vendor. It's free. It's a fairly simple process to do, and you would get the emails on any solicitations that come out.
And just,
You're on mute.
okay, sorry about that. Just to add what Alan said, if you are thinking about, I hope you are, of being part of the community evaluation panel, this is also a great time to go ahead and register if you're not already to be a vendor. It helps it just helps the process go smoothly, and like Alan said, you receive notice of funding availability when they are released. So definitely encourage you guys to go ahead and register now if you plan on applying for either the NOFA or being a panelist on the community evaluation.
Next question, please, Sarah. And I see you, Mr. Connor. Mr. Kenny, we'll get to you after we finish the questions in the chat. Please be patient with us. Thank you.
Question number 2, what does technical assistance entail?
That's a great question. I'm going to try to take a stab at this. We're providing technical assistance prior to the closeout of the application. Once you become an awardee, we will work with you to tailor, to customize something that works for you based on the proposal and based on what you need to become successful in achieving your impact. I will open it to other colleagues who may want to add something else before we move on. Thank you. Do we have any other questions in the chat?
Yes, ma'am. The other question from Kate, do 100% of the people assisted need to be within the geographical area for anti-displacement? Also, is it acceptable if they're in a vulnerable area, or do they all need to be in the active or chronic area?
Rachel, would you like to take a stab at that too?
Yes, I'd be happy to. So
Thank you.
I'll answer the latter question first, but we definitely encourage you to focus on the vulnerable areas. We actually see that as the highest priority because those are the areas really where the people most at risk live, and you can kind of see that from the data. So we are going to use the criteria outlined in the NOFA, which is that applications must benefit residents who live within areas vulnerable, active, and chronic displacement. So that's the guidance that we're using in the NOFA. So if you're focused, or if you're looking at going outside of those areas, know that when you submit an application, the evaluators are going to be looking for how the residents in areas of displacement risk are going to benefit from your project.
Sarah, thanks, Rachel.
Okay, the other question is, if you're awarded, I understood that it is over a 2-year period, correct?
So I can go ahead and answer that.
Go ahead, please.
So you can apply for up to 3 years, okay? The first year, the initial term, you can do 1 year with 2 additional terms, but we encourage you, it depends on how you orchestrate your NOFA. But you can apply up to 3 years of the funding. If you're selected, the initial contract term will be for 1 year. The second and third years are extended based on outcome, performance, and updated budgets.
Thank you, Ursula. Sarah, next question.
The next question. I saw that the Community Investment and Wealth Building Strategy report slides mention a few types of housing cooperative as well as CLTs. Can you talk a little bit more about how these solutions are relevant, given that this funding is not for land acquisition or development?
So that's an excellent question. And we think that this funding can be used to help tenants organize or bring people together to choose what kind of a community land trust or co-op they're going to endeavor to create. So while it's not land acquisition or property acquisition, it is for all of the foundational work that needs to take place in order for you to create a CLT or a cooperative, a housing cooperative. And I hope that answers the question, but certainly I open it to other colleagues who may want to pitch in and add something. Next question, Sarah, please.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank
Will a
you.
list of potential partners registered as vendors be provided to the community, to ease cooperative application?
I'm gonna refer to Alan, maybe on this one, Alan.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I didn't hear the question. Sarah, could you say it again?
Yes. Well, a list of potential partners, parentheses, it says registered as vendors, be provided to the community to see cooperative applications. To ease, I'm sorry, let me read that again, sorry. Will a list of potential partners be provided to the community to ease cooperative applications?
Like a list of vendors. I think the question from Mr. Renault, I'm reading it as the intent, and please correct me if I'm misreading this. The intent is, will we share a list of registered vendors so people can form collaborations and cooperations? And please speak up if I misunderstood or misinterpreted that question.
Okay, he said yes.
Okay, great, thank you.
So I'm not sure, we're gonna have to think about that one. I'm not
Sure.
sure exactly how we do that. We want to be inclusive of everybody who's interested, so we want to make sure that list is all encompassing. So we need to, Rachel,
Got
you
it.
want to talk?
Well, I was gonna say, we did share that we would share the sign-in sheet for this meeting. So that's one way to collaborate with the folks that are interested in submitting an application.
Yeah, and the workshops as well. I think we'll be able to provide a list of people that are attending those. So yeah, that's a good shot, but they're interested, right?
Thank
Well,
you,
I was-
Alan.
I was
Go
gonna
ahead,
suggest maybe we take some of the hands and then we can
Yes.
go back to the chat.
Absolutely, thank you. And Mr. Kenny, I believe your hand has been up for a while, and I apologize for that. Thank you. And then Darcy.
Oh,
Rand.
great. Yeah, thank you. I had two questions for two different organizations I work with. One provides like residential substance abuse treatment in an inpatient setting to people who are primarily from the Eastern Crescent area, and the location of their property is in one of the eligible areas, and the building that they are in is in pretty severe need of some weatherization. And I saw that that's eligible, I think, for maybe single family or multifamily, but this is technically, I think it's called transitional housing or maybe even congregate shelter. But as far as I can tell, that would be eligible, but I just wanted to confirm if that might be an eligible use.
I am taking a minute to process. I feel almost like we need more details around the type of property and the type of housing that it is before we can answer that question.
Well, and then again, the community evaluators are going to be really making the decision on the priorities. So, it won't be the staff that is the arbitrator of like, if this is in, if that's out. In the NOFA, we outline what is definitely not an eligible use, as we say, because we simply have other funds for those, land development, land acquisition, and homelessness services. But for other uses, it's really, we really encourage you as the applicant to make the case for the program and how that program meets the funding priorities that we've outlined. And we can talk further, but I just did want to give that framing.
Gotcha, I appreciate that. My second question is that I know that it said in there that funds are not for development because of the acquisition and then the upcoming RHDA funds connected with Project Connect. I have another organization that they've been offered kind of free land and free kind of part of an upcoming development, so very heavily discounted. And they are wishing to either participate in the development or sign a long-term lease or some other way of participating. in order to secure some commercial spots for economic opportunity for residents in these displacement areas. So that would not be an eligible use for those other two funding sources. So I was wondering if there is something that's development related, but is not, an eligible residential development, would that potentially be an eligible use under the rules that you posted in the NOFA?
And so they're not residential, right? Mr. Kenny?
That's correct. This would be for commercial spaces, small business places for people vulnerable to displacement.
My gut, and again, like Rachel said, at the end of the day, the evaluators will make the decision, and the NOFA tells us that this is housing related. For ultimately all of the investments need to be deployed to help stabilize tenants and renters, to stabilize homeowners, and to create economic mobility opportunities. And like Alan said, the NOFA will supersede anything else. So I'm reluctant to really say more than that, but I welcome Ursula or Rachel or any of the other colleagues to have an input here.
Yeah, so I'll jump in here. So from a purely solicitation point of view, not your program, right? Solicitation. We are welcoming all applications that people want to submit that they think apply to this program. The first threshold bar that you have to meet and get over, right? The gatekeeper kind of thing, is that it's got to meet the criteria of the NOFA. And so if we, the people who are doing that evaluation, determine that it doesn't meet that criteria, then what we send is a non-responsive letter to the individual who submitted the application saying that your application did not meet the whatever the standards that we have set, and therefore you're deemed non-responsible and it's not going to move forward and be evaluated. Now, the easiest way to explain that is if for some reason you did not sign your application, and I know it's electronic signature, but I'm just using that as an example, then you would be deemed non-responsive right off the bat. No matter how good your application was, you didn't meet that threshold. So it's kind of that's what you're looking at. So if you think that it should apply and that you should be in the program, you can submit an application. Obviously, you're at risk of getting kicked out, but you may also make it through, if that helps at all.
I appreciate that, and I understand the role of the community evaluators. Would y'all be at least open to more kind of detailed explanation of the use of funds ahead of time to see if we could get some kind of pre-clearance on whether it meets the solicitation requirements?
Well, my initial thought is no. We don't know how many applications we're going to get, how many people are going to want that kind of advice. My recommendation is to go to the workshops, the 4 workshops, try to go to one of those. And the staff there, and Ursula, you're welcome to weigh in on this, but they're going to help as much as they can without telling you what you need to do or filling out your application. So at some point they have to stop and say, it's your call, right? But they can help you understand what our application is doing and what the parameters are.
Thank you for your questions, Mr. Kenny. I'm gonna take Ms. Darcy Rendon's question. I hope I pronounced your name correctly. And I'm
Yes,
sorry
You
if I did not.
Thank you.
Of course.
I have a few questions. So I work for LifeWorks. We're a community organization dedicated to helping transition age youth. One of our services is housing youth who are experiencing homelessness. So we've had a program and they're all housed, right? They have tenants, they have leases. I know that doesn't fall under direct homeless services. They're already housed, they're tenants and renters. Are there any caps on emergency rental assistance? Is one. And then that same paragraph in the NOFA says, other program services and investments, what within our program that keeps for youth who were formerly homeless housed, like what could we include in there? Like what counts as not homeless services? Because we do homeless services, but we also have, they're housed. So they're no longer homeless.
Right. So if you're looking, and again, I'll go to my colleagues to keep me honest here, but if it's rental assistance, if it's a form of rental assistance to help people stay in their homes, keep tenants and renters stabilized, then that is within the guidelines of the NOFA. It's clearly outlined in the first eligible use, in the first bucket. So if I'm hearing you correctly, that's what you're trying to do.
Yes.
For the population that's housed, they're not homeless, they're housed already, and you're trying to help them if they're experiencing some sort of a hardship and need to make the difference and meet the gap between what the rent is and what they're able to pay.
Yes.
Okay.
So homeless services would count as if we had a young adult who was not housing, we were putting into housing, that would not count for rental assistance because this would be the first time that they were being housed.
No, that would not be homeless services. You're helping someone who's already housed, who's falling short in making the rent.
Okay, so what I'm saying, okay, if we have a young adult, we've got an apartment for them. They sign a lease, but they haven't entered the apartment yet, but they have a lease and they're not going to be able to fill the gap. Does that count?
It's rental assistance.
Okay, as long as it's rental assistance.
If it's rental assistance, because we have PHA who offers a variety of different programs to help homeless and chronically homeless neighbors. And so if it's rental assistance, I'm sure the community evaluators would love to see it.
For sure. So
Hala,
Tim,
can I ask Darcy
Yes.
something?
Yes.
Hi, Darcy. So I think what Hala is trying to explain is that we're not doing direct assistance outreach to homelessness, but if there's someone in the queue who you've already identified as having a lease agreement, having paid the down payment or whatever you might need to be a resident at the unit, and you're saying that there's a gap. When you're saying there's a gap, what kind of gap are you saying? Because I think that what we're trying to do is mitigate displacement in regards to tenants. And a hard line for us is this identifying someone who's a tenant and someone who is coming directly off of the street or into a program that gets them directly off the street. We're trying to find the line there. So I want to be sure I'm hearing you clearly.
Yeah, that is a line that I'm also trying to help identify with you on the line. So, I mean, the majority of our youth are from Austin, are coming out of the foster care juvenile justice system, our majority people of color, LGBTQI. So in terms of vulnerable communities, I mean, I believe they would fit, but the gap that I'm referring to might be, for us to get them on a lease, obviously they have funding already, they've got a job, but they're going in and we identify that there is already a gap when they are entering the lease. They're entering the first month or second month and then they have a gap. But as long as they have a lease,
right. And I think, Darcy,
yeah,
I think that's the clarity, right? So it's like if they've entered into and executed a lease, and then during the course of their lease, whether it's after 1 month or after 2 months, I think that sounds like a qualifiable expense under this mitigation displacement fund. We know that a lot of people exiting out of foster care, that's one of the entry points into unhoused populations, homelessness. So I definitely understand you there, but I think the hard line that we're trying to draw is that the funding is for individuals who have established that they are renting somewhere, and we're trying to mitigate the fact that they've already entered and they're going to be exiting, versus the other interventions that get them into the pipeline of being housed. I hope that's helpful.
That is very helpful.
I didn't mean to kind of interrupt, but I wanted to be sure that we're answering Darcy correctly. And I see Carol's chat there. So basically you cannot help someone move into housing. I think that it's moving someone from the street into housing versus someone who's already established housing situation. But I'll hand it back over to Hala and I'll put myself on mute. I'm sorry.
No, thank you. Thank you for your guidance and feedback on this. So yeah, if it was to make the difference between what they have and what they need to avoid getting evicted or losing their home, then definitely it fits in.
Yeah, so does that also include utilities? It's rendered tenant stabilization, so would that count if they are backlogged on utilities or they're about to have their utilities cut off, which would then put them in violation of their lease?
We agonized over this. If it's housing related and it affects their ability to maintain their home, then it's rental assistance. We're going to put it under that broad umbrella of rental assistance. And as long as they don't qualify for some of the Austin Energy programs, then it's rental assistance, because without it, they'd be evicted.
Perfect, that makes perfect sense. And I just
Thank you.
have one last question.
Okay.
I know it's for 3 years. So once you commit to 1 year of funding, you know, the application has space for year 1, year 2, year 3. Is it possible that, I'm not saying this is the case, but is it possible that maybe 1 year you need more or less money? So you might add different amounts. Like, let's say year 1, you need, I don't know, 250. And then year 2, you might need 275. And then year 3, you might need 250 again. Is there a possibility for moving from year to year with those extensions to either increase or decrease the amount as long as it meets the minimum?
My understanding is if you apply for an amount, you could apply for that amount for 1 year, for 2 years, or up to 3 years. The initial contract will be for 1 year, extendable for another year or for 2 years based on the outcome, based on the performance, based on the results, based on the new budget that you submit. I think what you're asking is, can you come back and ask for more money? And I'm not sure, more money than what you applied for initially, right? And I don't think that is going to be maybe possible because of the accrual, right? Because you're going now, you're allocating the dollars for 3 years in advance. And so you're spending a portion of the dollars the first year, you're coming back, extending the contract, renewing the contract, and modifying it, applying for the second installment, and then same thing with the third year. So I don't know if there's going to be, from a budgetary standpoint, that you're going to have the leeway to ask for more than what you originally asked for in the proposal. I hope that makes sense.
It
And
does.
I'll again defer to my colleagues to
Yes.
keep me honest here.
Yeah, and also from a solicitation contracting point of view, again, not program. Think of this like a pilot program, because this is the first time we've done this. We're doing innovative solicitation here, which is great. We're also going to be doing somewhat of an innovative contracting here. But the bottom line is, not everybody that submits an application may be funded. First of all, I mean, if we get 100 applications, we're expecting 15, right? There's more need out there possibly than there is funds. So that's the first thing. Everybody is entitled to do 1 year, 2 years, 3 years budgeting from the front end, but obviously every year is the budget year for the city, also for HFC. So it will depend every year on how much funding we have, how much funding gets allocated to this program, and then which programs are being successful and which ones may not. So there's a lot of unknowns going forward. So I don't know how else to explain it. Kind of look at this as a pilot project and give it your best shot on the budget.
Thank you, Ms. Rendon. I'm gonna move on to Ms. Caselli.
Paula, I
Yeah.
just want to suggest that we might want to go back to the chat. So we kind of go back and forth on the hands versus the chat. So maybe after this next person, we go back to the
Yes.
chat. There's several. questions.
Absolutely. Thank you. Ms. Caselli?
Hi, so it's super helpful to hear some of the stuff about like keeping folks housed. One question I have, and I think it mirrors one in the chat, so maybe you're gonna get a twofer, but about designing, prototyping, and launching services. So like, I run a software company, I want to partner with a nonprofit to automate recertifications to keep people in affordable housing housed in like high displacement areas. Is that the sort of thing where it's like, it's a new service, it's a new thing that has to be created that would be like considered appropriate in the NOFA?
So will you be working with a nonprofit partner?
Yeah.
And your role will be to provide the technology?
Mm-hmm.
Rachel, Nefertiti, Ursula, anybody has any input?
So again, I would say that, you know, if it's a housing focused kind of creative solution, you know, definitely submit an application. And then I think you're going to be evaluated by those evaluators based on, you know, the outcomes that your kind of the key performance indicators that you're going to achieve. And so I think you'll have to sort of make the case for how the prototyping and the kind of designing is setting up for some really significant long-term outcomes. You know, it's really on your application, I think, to make that case that you're, you know, that you're bringing forward a solution.
Do you find that like sort of like existing solutions tend to be given more weight than new ones?
We don't know, right? Because one, it's community evaluators that will be making these recommendations to the Community Advisory Committee. And so we just have no way of knowing that.
Okay, cool, thanks.
Thank you. And Rachel, thanks for the suggestion. We're going to go back to the chat. Ms. Ramos, please help me get to the next question in the chat. I don't see any hands up at this point. Thank you.
Okay. Let's see here. One of the questions was, I am new to Project Connect, and I'm new to how this works. By chronic displacement, does this mean the homes will be taken down for the train construction? Or are those homes the ones that will increase in value and risk displacing those that might not be able to afford their homes?
I am happy to answer that, but also happy to defer to Ms. Jackman. Nefertiti, if you want to pitch in or.
Yeah, I am definitely supportive of the team members. I'm just here and I'm sorry because I'm popping in and out for other inquiries, but chronic displacement is where a significant population has already been displaced from the area, and you are seeing increased housing costs already around you. And so, yes, and Rachel, I would love for you to take that question as well to add to that.
Sure, yeah, so we have fact sheets that go into more detail on this, but Nefertiti is right. So this actually has nothing to do with how Project Connect is going to impact the areas, or it's just the geographies, the areas that the Project Connect's line is going through. There's 3 different sort of characteristics that we note, and they're vulnerable is sort of like susceptible to gentrification and it hasn't come yet, and active is like it's currently pushing people out, prices are rising, and then chronic displacement is that prices have been high for a very long time, and there's really not a large density of vulnerable populations left, and so there are some, but they're hanging on by a thread. So that's how we can kind of think of chronic displacement.
Sarah, next question, please.
Yes, ma'am. Next question. a co-op of co-ops be counted as partnerships for the purposes of this application?
So I'm not sure I'm clear on the
I was
question.
gonna say,
Go
Sarah,
ahead.
yeah, can you repeat the question?
Will a co-op of co-ops be counted as a partnership for the purpose of this application?
Mr.
think-
Kaufman, maybe you want to clarify a little bit. I see you're on my screen. So maybe you just add some clarification to the question, please.
It's actually my question. I will go ahead.
Yes, sir.
Sure. Yeah, sure. So some of the existing advocacy and foundation and nonprofit charitable organizations on the ground here in Austin, which have existed for many years at this point, and are not necessarily in themselves qualified organizations. We're talking Austin Cooperative Business Association, which is a trade association of co-ops, or the Austin Cooperative Foundation, Business Foundation, which is a charitable organization of co-ops, are composed as co-ops of co-ops. Let's say cooperatives of existing housing cooperatives on the ground, which themselves have done housing development, significant housing development in Austin. So that is my question, whether such a cooperative of cooperatives would be counted as a partnership for these purposes, for this particular partnership, for this particular application.
So these are housing cooperatives. This is a
They are.
cooperative of housing cooperatives.
Indeed, these are cooperative of housing cooperatives, which represent roughly 1,000 people in Austin.
Wow. Okay, and they're the cooperative that is consisting of all the housing cooperatives provides services and assistance and capacity building for those cooperatives that have 1,000 people living in them.
Indeed, except the other two that already exist are, as I said, advocacy or charitable organizations. So imaginally this would be a, more oriented towards what you all are seeking to provide here, rather than, strictly advocacy or charitable purposes. Does that make sense?
Yes, absolutely, it makes sense.
Okay.
And we do have in the NOFA listing, we listed CLTs and co-ops under the home ownership, preservation, and expansion.
Yeah, I understand. It's just that in your slides today, you mentioned that it would be either nonprofits or partnerships of for-profits and nonprofits that would be counted. And so, my imagining here is a partnership, sure, but we prefer, just by nature of what we are familiar with in the cooperative movement, we prefer a co-op of co-ops as a partnership rather than, perhaps the, like a more typical partnership that you're used to,
So is your cooperative of cooperatives not a nonprofit?
It could be structured as a nonprofit if that is the requirement that you are providing here. Yeah,
Our
the other two are nonprofits, I will mention, the ACBA and the ACBF. Yeah.
So the NOFA requires the applicant to be either a nonprofit or a partnership with a nonprofit.
And yeah, well, it would be okay, then at a minimum, it could definitely be a partnership with a nonprofit and limited equity cooperatives in town.
Okay.
All right, understood.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Next question, please, Sarah.
Yes, ma'am. What are the criteria of becoming a community evaluator? Do we need to live in one of the affected areas?
Thank you, Sarah. I'll defer to Ursula, who's the lead on this program.
Oh, give me just a second. All right, so that will be helpful, Sarah, if you are that community evaluator was part of the area displacement. But the minimum requirements for a person to be on the panel is to be able to serve up to 1 year or take part of the valuation of 2 rounds of applications, dedicate approximately 30 hours over 3 to 4 weeks, complete an application. We do encourage those that are in community leadership and engagement, experience with displacement and gentrification, and some, experience reviewing panels. But being in the displacement, what we're aiming to do is to match our community evaluators to match the displacement line. So if you go to the map, and I believe we provided a link, or it's in the NOFA of the displacement area, we want our community evaluators to be a good representation of those that are displaced, and that's what we're aiming for.
Thank you, Ursula. Next question, please.
If possible, is it, it's helpful to get a list of attendees via Excel, not PDF. Will that be available?
We can make, I believe we will make the list of attendees available. Julie, is it going to be Excel or? Do you know? I'm not sure, to be honest.
We can make it in Excel.
Okay, thank you so much, Julie. Appreciate it. Next question, please.
Yes, ma'am. Can partnerships provide underlying financials for each partnership organization?
So I'm hearing that the question is asking if every partner is going to have a line item in the budget to get paid. And if that's the question that is being asked, then yes, because the budget requires every partner's share to be indicated and listed. So if you're a for-profit partnering with a nonprofit, you have to outline exactly in the proposal and in the budget how much money the nonprofit is going to be paid. And that's to protect our local partners, obviously, and ensure that they get a share for the work that they're going to do. Rachel, would you like to add anything to that, please?
You covered it.
Thank you. Excellent. Sarah, I'm sorry to keep bothering you, but next question, please. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. What about moving into one apartment to another apartment?
I'm going to be brave and I'm going to say that if you're falling short in terms of your ability to maintain your rental, your home, and your family's stability, your family's housing stability is going to be impacted, and you're moving because you can't afford the rent anymore, then I see some people nodding. I would say that's rental assistance and tenant and renters stabilization. So I don't see why that would not be eligible use. It falls within the first bucket. Thank you.
Okay, next question. Do
Yes,
you
ma'am.
submit a new budget each year?
Yes, that's easy. Next.
Yes, ma'am. Final question. This is from Darcy. Final question. When will the RHDA/OHDA and the AHFC land acquisition NOFA be released?
It's an
Have
excellent
they already
question.
been, or have they already been released?
It's an excellent question. Thank you. The AHFC land acquisition, which we refer to as the anti-displacement community acquisition program, has been released and it's been available on the website, and we can put the link in the website for you. I believe it was released on December 30th.
Oh, they were asking about the RHDA and OHDA.
Right, that's the next component of this question, I believe, and the ROTA and ODA, which is going to be released in May, that has not been released yet. Any other questions in the chat? Or I don't see any hands up, but please correct me if I'm not seeing correctly. Just want to make sure we answer any questions that you have to the degree to which we can. Mr. Kwan? Ms. Kwan? I'm sorry. I'm so sorry.
Okay. Hi. Yeah, actually, I asked a question on the chat. There's two parts to it.
Yes, sir.
What would happen to a service that gets designed and implemented or tested, or even a product after the 3-year period, should it go that long? So is there like, will there be like a handoff, or will there be evaluation whether this should go on or be scaled? What would that look like? That's my first one question. And second question is it possible to build a partnership after the application has been submitted and approved? So like if the lead organization decides that they need some extra support, can that be arranged to the awardee? Yeah, or on the side of the awardee.
So let me take the first piece first, and of course, also will ask for my colleagues to pitch in, but let me take a stab at the first piece of your question, which I believe you said the sustainability piece. How will this program or project or product be sustainable past the 2 or 3 years of funding? I want to remind everyone that Project Connect is a 10 to 13 year initiative, and that the funding is going to be available in tranches throughout this next 10 to 13 years. We hope that whatever projects you put together, whatever proposals you submit, become sustainable as we move forward. And maybe you won't need funding, but if you do need funding and you qualify for future funding and the eligible uses are still the same, there are no guarantees, obviously. We can only talk about what's available today with this NOFA. But if there is still community-initiated solutions for the next tranches of funding, then you can apply and see if you will get the money. Mr. Kwan, did I address that sustainability question for you?
Yes, you did.
Is
Thank
there
you.
anyone? Thank you. And is there anyone else who wants to add any?
No, I just, I want to add, you answered exactly correct. Unfortunately, we do not know what future priorities will be. We certainly hope to continue with the funding for community-initiated solutions, but there is no guarantee that the future priorities will align the same. And so this is why we are going through a process where we will do budget allocations for the various priorities related to displacement prevention initiatives every 3 years. So that could change, but this is one reason why we certainly want to help all of the organizations to be successful deploying their dollars and delivering the services that they identify on their applications. And so hopefully we can communicate to the public how successful the works and these efforts have been. And with that, hopefully additional funding will be allocated, especially for those projects and investments that show merit and that they are successful.
Yeah, and I want to chime in here. I don't want to be negative, but the AHFC reserves the right to cancel this whole solicitation and not accept any application. So, you know, we think we've done a good job on this. We're very innovative. It's a new thing for us. Hopefully we'll get great applications and this program will be a really good success. But just bear in mind that sometimes we have to, start from scratch and do it over. So just keep that in mind.
Thank you, Alan. Mr. Kwan, you had another piece. There was a second component to your
Yes,
inquiry?
it's separate, but gosh, what was it? The first answer was so good that I forgot the second one. If so, anyone can help me, I would appreciate that. I should have written it down.
How about I go to the next hand that's up and then we'll come back to you, Mr. Kwan.
Someone helped me. Someone helped me.
Okay, great.
Thank you. So it was about so can an awardee solicit support from a partner organization that wasn't part of the application? Should that be necessary? No.
So my instinct, and I'll look to Alan to keep me honest in this, my gut says, once you submit a proposal, you have to complete that term according to what you put in the proposal. So I don't know if you can make changes with the city or amend an existing proposal that you got funded for. But Alan, I'll look to you to correct me if I'm wrong.
So the solicitation is what it is. And if we make a change through an addendum along the way on this process, then that will change the language in the NOFA accordingly, right? But assuming it stays the way it is, the people that are selected that successfully go through the evaluation process, they will enter into a contract negotiation phase. As part of that contract negotiation phase, that's where the rubber meets the road. Basically, you've laid out your ideal of what you want to do and how you want it to go. And then when the city staff and the partnership or the nonprofit sit down to do the contract, that's when you actually nail everything down.
And so it can't be changed in the middle of the way, right, Alan? If like in the middle of the first year, an organization comes back and says, we need to change this. I think that's what Mr. Kwan was asking. I need a partner. I want to add a partner to this contract. Can they do that?
Right, and I don't want to say yes or no, but you can't say you're going to build a building and then end up building a pool, okay? I mean, it can't be night and day. But what I'm saying is there is room for negotiation from both sides. Certainly the city and HFC wants the best partnership, the best nonprofit program that we can get. So that's what we're trying to do. And obviously you as the partner or nonprofit is trying to create the best program, you know, cost effective, whatever that you can. So there is some negotiation involved, and that I don't know how far it'll go, but
if I can just add a point of clarification, I think to add to what Alan is saying, in terms of who the city would hold responsible on that contract, it would be the individual organization or entity that applied for the funding. That's who the city will look to make sure that the deliverables are provided as negotiated in that contract. However, if an organization feels at any time throughout the process that they need to add capacity, they need to bring in partners or other business or consultants, they can certainly do that to be able to execute the contract as outlined in the application and as approved. So and then that would be up to them in terms of how the negotiation with that vendor. Now, you know, so, and that's certainly within reason, and that happens all of the time. And this is how organizations might contract out additional, you know, you hire partners all the time. And I guess it depends on what you're saying as a partner. You hire your own consultants, but we do not manage all of that. The city of Austin does not manage and dictate who you bring in to help support do the work. So, I mean, it might be, yeah, it could be a number of different entities and if there is any question or concern, if you were to come to that point, you can feel free to reach out to us during that process, and we can provide greater clarification at that time.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Nefertiti. We have several questions in the chat that have come up. I want to be respectful of everyone's time. It's 6:57. So I'm going to take one or two more questions, and then I'm happy to stay on to try to attempt to answer some more questions, but I understand people have things to do and need to go at 7. So let me take a question from the chat. Sarah, there's actually one that I see that I really want to answer, which is, can a local nonprofit organization or community-based organization partner with an organization that is from another locale or a national organization? And yes, that's an easy one. Absolutely. As long as you're, again, serving the residents and the communities that are in the maps and the dashboard within 1 mile of Project Connect line or stations, in the most vulnerable to displacement, chronic displacement, or in a state of active displacement geographies. I see Ms. Rendon's hand up. I'll take one final question from her. Okay, her hand is down. Is there any other questions, Sarah, in the chat?
No, I was sorry. I had it muted. I was on mute.
Okay.
It was about the third bucket, the other displacement strategies.
Yep.
Could you provide more information on leveraging affordable housing, the good paying jobs and skill building and other models? Does that mean workforce development programs are eligible?
If it's pertaining to housing. So let's say you partner, and I'm giving this as an example. Let's say you partner with a housing developer for a nonprofit that provides training and skills building, and regardless of age, whether they're youth or, and regardless of age, providing technical skills and expertise and training. So, we're helping people become electricians or carpenters, or because we have a shortage of housing, of people who do the work to build housing. If it's housing related and you're working with a developer to build affordable housing, and your workforce development organization could work. But I'll defer to my colleagues to add anything.
Yeah,
And this-
I think that's great. Yeah. And yeah.
It's housing
I think-
related.
Absolutely.
As long as
Although,
the
when
tenants
I was-
are.
Oh, I'm sorry, Darcy. What I was thinking about it, Darcy, I don't know if you're familiar with the Section 3 program through HUD that housing authorities provide, where it's not for housing, but it's an assistance to those who are looking for work that qualify for the assistance. I think that the line of reasoning for this was along that line. So it's replicating programs that have already been shown to be successful for those who are sometimes they're even focused on those who are hard to employ due to the history of their incarceration or their returning citizens and things like that. So I think that that's the line that we're trying to strike, where it's like, if it's an involvement with a program similar to a Section 3, that would be a framework and a baseline to kind of assess what will qualify.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
At this time, it's 7:01, and I want to thank you all for staying with us. I think there's still close to 40 people on the line. Really appreciate your time, especially during this very busy time, and it's dinner time generally. But anyway, thank you very much. We appreciate you being with us. We look forward to meeting you again at one of our next sessions. The next one is going to be on April 27th. And we hope that you can tell people about this program and share the information and tell them about the sessions that are going to follow. Really, thank you and have a good night.
Also, you can send questions to my email or Ursula Henderson's email, and it's on the presentation that we're recording. So we will answer all of those questions, either individually to you or as a group. So I don't want to be the last word here. I just wanted to get that in. Thank you.
Thank you all. Have a good night.